What's this other jet doing? What's this other jet doing? Holy fuck!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Jesus fucking Christ!
Don't touch it.
Oh my God!
I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
This is clearly, the way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. This is not, it's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
We made it outside, we made it about a block.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
They
detonated.
were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running. Just ran up, and then you just sort of this cloud of shit chasing you down. Just ran up West Street. I'm not running. I jumped behind a battalion car. I hit up the car. It was swinging down.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
I lost my son,
My nephew.
My uncle.
My son.
on September 11th, 2001.
Most people don't know that a third tower fell on September 11th.
World Trade Center 7, a 47-story skyscraper, was not hit by a plane.
Although the official explanation is that fire brought down Building 7.
Over 1,200 architects and engineers have looked into the evidence
And believe there is more to the story.
Bring justice to my son.
My uncle,
My nephew.
my son.
and thousands of others who died on September 11th.
Go to buildingwhat.org.
Hello, my name is Bob McElvain. My son Bobby was murdered on September 11th, 2001 at the World Trade Center. Bobby was 26 years old. Today, March 1st, 2010, I delivered a petition to each of the 50 members of the New York City Council on behalf of 1,000 architects and engineers. This petition calls upon the City Council to open up an investigation into the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7, a 47-story building which was not hit by a plane, which nevertheless fell into its own footprint at 5:20 in the afternoon of September 11th. Help us make the City Council take action on the findings of scientists, architects, and engineers who have proven the federal government lied to us about the collapse of Building 7.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Please sign up at nyccan.org right now and join our coordinated effort to bring justice to my son and the thousands that were murdered on September 11th.
Do you believe that the government had anything to do with the attack of 9/11? Do you believe in a conspiracy in terms of the attack of 9/11?
No, but I do believe that it is the first time in history that fire has ever melted steel. I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved. World Trade Center 7. World Trader 1 and 2 got hit by planes. 7, miraculously, the first time in history, steel was melted by fire. It is physically impossible.
And who do you think is responsible for that?
I have no idea. But to say that we don't know that it imploded and it was an implosion and a demolition is beyond ignorant. Look at the films, get a physics expert here from Yale, from Harvard, pick the school. It defies reason.
Let's get one. Let's get one, because that
I would do it.
Is the unthinkable.
It is the unthinkable. But imagine if somebody could convince you of that, could prove it to you, Elizabeth. Just 7.
Saw the big hubbub going on around building 7, walked around it. I saw a hole. I didn't see a hole bad enough to knock a building down, though. So, yeah, there was definitely fire in the building, but I didn't hear any, maybe this is movie crap. I didn't hear any creaking, or I didn't hear any indication that it was going to come down. And all of a sudden, the radios exploded, and everybody started screaming, "Get away, get away, get away from it!" And I was like a deer in the headlights, and I look up, and I think I remember pretty clearly the 2 guys that I knew were on the transit radio. I don't know if those tapes are out there, but I can try and look for them and show you exactly what I'm talking about. But it was that moment, get away, and I looked up, and it was nothing I would ever imagine seeing in my life. The thing started peeling in on itself, and I mean, there was an umbrella of crap 7 feet over my head that I just stared at. And somebody grabbed my shoulder, and I started running, and the shit's hitting the ground behind me. And the whole time you're hearing thum, 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 thum. So I think I know an explosion when I hear it, I was real close to Building 7 when it fell down, and running away from that sucked. That's one of the things that I live with all the time, and I don't know, but that didn't sound like just a building falling down to me while I was running away from it. There's a lot of eyewitness testimony down there hearing explosions. I didn't see any reason for that building to fall down the way it did, and a lot of guys should be saying the same thing.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back.
All right, guys. Sorry.
We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up. On flame. Debris coming down.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, one of the buildings in support of the World Trade Center towers, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
Did you know that a 3rd tower fell on 9/11? At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall, after trying to deny it. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics.
A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted weeks, if not months, before.
9/11 claimed thousands of lives and touched millions more. It led us into 2 wars, and was used to scale back our civil liberties and invade our privacy. But many people are beginning to question what we were told, and we are demanding answers.
Zie je vanaf boven gaan? Nee, je gaat vanaf onder.
Die gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen.
Dit valt anders dan het World Trade Center.
Vind je niet dan?
Ja, je ziet het, de onderste verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, en de rest zakt er gewoon in. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Dat kan geen waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt.
In het officiële onderzoeksrapport van FEMA staat dat ze niet kunnen verklaren waarom gebouw nummer 7 is ingestort. Uitgebreid bespreken we alle mogelijke oorzaken met Denny Jowenko.
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar ze hebben wel...
Maar hij blijft erbij dat het gebouw is opgeblazen.
Het is vakwerk, zonder meer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens.
De vraag is dan, is zoiets van tevoren voorbereid of kan dat op 11 september zelf nog zijn besloten en uitgevoerd?
Met hoeveel man heeft u hoeveel tijd nodig om dat te doen?
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar...
Maakt u een inschatting?
Ja, dan moet je wel ervaren mensen hebben, maar als je een man of 30, 40 zou hebben... Kijk, een paar met de snijbrander, de rest brengt hem aan. Andere mensen sluiten dat deadcord met die boosters aan. Dat moet allemaal precies op hetzelfde moment gaan. En weer een derde die zet de elektronische systemen erop. En dan gaat hij.
Terwijl overal brand was en ook in dat gebouw was brand?
Dat is niet geblust.
Ze hebben de brand niet geblust. Dus de mensen die dat moesten doen, die moesten het doen terwijl het binnen nog brandde.
Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Ik heb geen verklaring voor.
In gebouw nummer 7 zaten onder meer de IRS, het ministerie van Defensie, de CIA, de Secret Service, de commandobunker van burgemeester Giuliani en de SEC, de beurswaakhond die toeziet op de financiële schandalen van Wall Street.
As reported by the New York Times, engineers were baffled by the collapse of Building 7. Since no steel frame high-rise has ever completely collapsed due to fire, how are we to understand this mysterious event?
High-rise buildings simply do not collapse due to fire. There has never been until 9/11 an experience where a high-rise building that was steel frame completely collapsed. There have been fires burned longer in similar structures without any collapse.
In this test, done by British Steel in 1995, a large amount of typical office furniture was burned to see what would happen to the heavy steel beams that supported the ceiling.
It's not that it melts in a fire. In fact, the fires, normal fires, are not hot enough to melt steel. Even if you were, for example, to use an unusual fuel like kerosene, you cannot achieve temperatures hot enough to melt steel. But what happens is it starts to lose its strength. And as it loses its strength, it starts to sag.
This was the largest test of its kind ever conducted. It showed how unprotected steel can be distorted, even by a normal office fire. But as is typical in steel buildings, the structural beams only slowly and progressively warped and sagged. There was no chance of a sudden collapse.
In my previous career as a firefighter, normally you'd never be afraid to go into a Type 1 building because they're not combustible, and you would just charge at it and put the fire out. Never in my training were we ever taught that these type of buildings could just collapse in on themselves. There's definitely much more going on than just fire.
The World Trade Center 7 building reminds me of the Meridian Bank building in some ways in Philadelphia. The Meridian Bank building is a 38-story skyscraper that burned for 18 hours in 1991, suffered extensive damage from the fire, but did not collapse.
NIST tells us that this collapse mechanism, starting with thermal expansion, that worked its way upward and outward through the building, in a matter of seconds, there's not enough time for the building to collapse the way that NIST tells us it collapsed.
NIST claims the fires were very large, very hot, and long-lasting, when in reality, observation, which has been researched by many people, shows these fires did not last very long. They were not in the locations where NIST claims they were at given times.
I'm a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. For the 40-plus years that I've been practicing architecture, I have designed a variety of buildings from small houses to high-rise office buildings. Some of the high-rises that I've worked on are 1 shell and 2 shell here in Houston. I was project manager for a 22-story office building in Akron, Ohio. Later in the day, when World Trade Center 7 collapsed, they had already showed us pictures of a few fires in that building, and I mean, they weren't even raging. And how could that cause a building to collapse as if it were imploded? Couldn't happen.
In its final report on the destruction of World Trade Center Building 7, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, went out of its way to avoid investigating the use of explosives. Their sole rationale for not investigating explosive use was the supposed lack of sufficiently loud sounds. NIST computed what they claimed would be the minimum loudness of an explosion that could sever Column 79 with a single blast. Then they claimed no observers detected explosions as loud as their predictions.
This size blast would have produced an incredibly loud sound that was not recorded on videos of the collapse nor reported by witnesses.
On the basis of this artificial threshold of interest, they swept aside all evidence of actual explosions and concluded that no explosives contributed to the destruction of the building.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used in the collapse of Building 7.
Yet there was voluminous evidence of explosions.
Here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You heard explosions, like boom!
We just heard one more explosion. That's about the 4th one we've heard.
A few blocks up West Broadway, looking toward the World Trade Center in the distance, Ashley Banfield was conducting an interview for MSNBC.
You were just told by police that you should move out of your...
The mic was set to pick up speech a few inches away. From the involuntary startle response,
oh my God,
we know explosions are being heard. However, listening closely, we discover that the microphone did indeed pick up the sounds of explosions, but very faintly. Turn up the volume. Listen for a low rumble in the background.
you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God.
This time the sound has been filtered to emphasize low frequencies. Listen for booms like a bass drum in the distance.
In fact, you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. You've got Carolina here? Yes. They advised us to leave because we have... Oh my God.
Here's a different version filtered to emphasize the mid-range sounds. The bass drum is gone. I would describe the blast sound like a train on a bumpy track.
You were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God.
Here's the original sound again.
You were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No. No.
If you didn't hear the blasts, back up, use earphones, turn up the volume, and listen again. There were 2 blasts, followed by 7 more, regularly spaced, all in 2.5 seconds. Craig Bartmer's testimony may come to mind.
The whole time you hear boom, 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 boom. I think I know an explosion when I hear it.
When we hear the sharp, regular series of sounds in the background, the building has not yet started to fall. When we hear the reporters say, "This is it,"
This is it.
The building has not yet started to fall. The fall of the building corresponds to the crescendo in the crowd response. Here is another street scene with the building in full view. The crowd responds almost immediately as the building starts to fall. This occurs just after the reporter says, "This is it."
This is it. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Therefore, the blasts we heard occurred seconds before the building started to fall. When Ashley Banfield says, "This is it," it is because she has been previously told to expect Building 7 to come down.
The brown building, the tall one, is number 7 World Trade Center. I've heard several reports from several different officers now that that is the building that is going to go down next.
Back in the studio, the anchor, Brian Williams, not only had foreknowledge of the collapse, he had a ready explanation.
What we've been fearing all afternoon has apparently happened. We were watching number 7 World Trade, which was part of the ancillary damage of the explosion and collapse of the other two.
Just as Ashley Banfield was told, Brian Williams was told. There is indeed evidence that even the top fire officials were told.
We are on the phone with New York Fire Department Lieutenant David Restuccio. Lieutenant, where are you right now?
I'm at the corner of Northmore Street and Greenwich Street.
Can you confirm it was number 7 that just went in?
Yes, sir.
And you guys knew this was coming all day?
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
Those in control of the story were planting the official narrative in our psyches in real time as events unfolded, using the press and even the fire and police departments as their unwitting agents.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And clearly those fires continue to burn at about 4:15 Eastern Daylight Time.
Building number 7 was going to collapse. That appears to be what has happened now.
One of those smaller buildings just fall to the ground. We had heard earlier that it was structurally unsafe.
We're getting word from New York right now that another building has collapsed. I understand that this is a 47-story building.
Information, of course, take a look at that right-hand side of the screen.
It's going down right now.
There it is.
Yep.
It went down right there. This is not from an explosion or an aircraft at this point, from our knowledge. The information that we have is that this is a building that probably was incredibly structurally damaged.
NIST is being dishonest.
That would have been an incredibly loud sound, and that sound was not picked up by any of the videos or witnesses that we have talked to.
NIST was lying about no testimony of explosions. There was both testimony and recorded evidence of explosions. However, NIST discounted any evidence of explosions that did not exceed its artificially contrived threshold of interest. The minimum sound level of interest, as determined by NIST, was based on a blast of RDX, one of the loudest explosives available, large enough to break a major column outright with a single blast. They assumed no efforts at noise abatement, complete transmission of the sound to the outside air, no absorption or blockage of the sound along the path. And who knows if they assumed the use of an efficient cutter charge, or if they simply figured the effect of a bomb planted beside a column. They don't say. Their sole reason for doing this calculation was to create a pretext to sidestep any actual investigation of explosives. Why would NIST, or anyone else, choose to exclude from its investigation any evidence of any explosions related to the destruction of the building? No honest scientific inquiry would ever be conducted in this way. But then, as we have seen repeatedly, the NIST report was not an honest scientific inquiry.
We might anticipate that an unevenly damaged building would fall over. Yet, videos of the collapse of Building 7 show a fairly symmetrical fall. How do we make sense of this?
If the buildings had come down by fire, we would have seen a more natural progression of collapse.
And clearly a more asymmetrical pattern should have been present.
The symmetry is the smoking gun. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
The exterior columns on the outside as well as on the inside at the bottom would have to be severed almost at the same time.
I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world. As an explosives loader, my job was to place explosives in the buildings to prepare them for demolition. I was licensed while in New York by the New York Fire Department to handle explosives. And I worked on major projects such as Seattle Kingdom, the Three River Stadium, Philadelphia Naval Hospital, and Keyspan gas holders in New York. What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it. That's another indicator that this NIST report is very suspect.
When it's all finished, the outside walls are piled one on top of the other right in the middle of the building. Just like a house of cards if it were coming down.
As a structural engineer, I don't believe that the failure of one column would normally bring down an entire building in the way we saw World Trade Center 7 come down.
According to NIST, the failure occurred at column 79 on level 12. This means basically they're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building. That just does not make any sense.
Hi, my name is Barry Jennings. I'm 52 years old. I've worked for 33 years at one location. When the Office of Emergency Management did an activation, they always included our locale. And what they did was monitor the emergency. They actually coordinated the emergency through several agencies. I received the call shortly after the first plane hit. I got there. I had to be inside on the 23rd floor when the second plane hit. Upon arriving into the OEM EOC, we noticed that everybody was gone. I saw coffee that was on the desk. Still, the smoke was still coming off the coffee. I saw half-eaten sandwiches. And only me, Mr. Hess, was up there. After I called several individuals, one individual told me that to leave and leave right away. Mr. Hess came running back in and said, "We're the only ones up here, we got to get out of here." He found the stairwell. So we subsequently went to the stairwell and we're going down the stairs. When we reached the 6th floor, the landing that we were standing on gave way. There was an explosion and the landing gave way. And I was left there hanging. I had to climb back up, and now I had to walk back up to the 8th floor. When I made it to the 6th floor, and there was an explosion. The explosion was beneath me. Keep in mind now, it's pitch black in there. All the lights went out. So when the explosion happened, it blew us back. I'm thinking I'm standing on the landing. I'm actually holding on to a pole above us. And I had to climb back up because Hess is yelling, "What do we do now?" I said, "There's only one thing we can do, and it's go back up." Both buildings were still standing. Both buildings were still standing. Both buildings were still standing. Keep in mind, I told you the fire department came and ran. They came twice. Why? Because building Tower 1 fell, then Tower 2 fell. And then when they came back with all concern now, like, to get me the hell out of there. I was trapped in there for several hours. I was trapped in there when both buildings came down. All this time, I'm hearing all types of explosions. All this time, I'm hearing explosions. When they finally got to us, and they took us down to what they called the lobby, because I asked them, I said, when we got down there, I said, "Where are we?" He said, "This was the lobby." And I said, "You gotta be kidding me." It was total ruins. Total ruins. Now keep in mind, when I came in there, the lobby had nice escalators. It was a huge lobby. And for me to see what I saw, it was unbelievable. And the firefighter that took us down kept saying, "Do not look down." And I kept saying, "Why?" He said, "Do not look down." And we were stepping over people. And you know, you can feel when you're stepping over people. this big giant police officer came to me and he says, "You have to run." I said, "I can't run, my knees are swollen." He said, "You're gonna have to get on your knees and crawl in." He said, "Because we have reports of more explosions." And that's when I started crawling, and I saw this guy fall behind me, and his comrades came to his aid. They dragged him to safety. I'm just confused about one thing, and one thing only: why World Trade Center 7 went down in the first place. I'm very confused about that. I know what I heard. I heard explosions. The explanation I got was it was the fuel oil tank. I'm an old boiler guy. If it was a fuel oil tank, it would have been one side of the building. Yes, you can use this footage.
Live and at large, it's the one 9/11 mystery that endures. World Trade Center building number 7.
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down soon.
I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved.
And if explosives were involved, that would mean that the most obnoxious protesters in recent years are right.
If you hear this shouting, it's a group of demonstrators who've come. 9/11 was an inside job. Oh, get a life. Get a life. 9/11 was an inside job.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Geraldo Rivera, and that noisy demonstration was more than 2 years ago. But the folks behind that TV ad you saw earlier are not so easy to dismiss as those demonstrators were. And what caught my eye is their claim that more than 1,300 architects and engineers examined the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. But up front tonight, Building 7 was no ordinary building. Among other key tenants, including several intelligence and law enforcement agencies, it also housed New York City's Emergency Operations Center, known as Mayor Giuliani's bunker. Here to tell us what they know about its collapse and why they question the official conclusions are Bob McIlvaine, whose son died in the World Trade Center, and Tony Zambati, a mechanical engineer. Nice to see you guys. Welcome.
Thank you,
welcome.
Geraldo.
Nice to meet you, Geraldo. Our condolences, obviously, for your loss. But Tony, let me start with you. You're an engineer. Are you suggesting that the official account that Building 7 collapsed because of the fire melting the steel or in some other ways, destroying the integrity, the structural integrity of the building, that's false? You think that that's false?
Yes, I do. And for a couple reasons. One is that Building 7 came down. It went into a sudden collapse across the full width and length of the building for 2.25 seconds, which amounted to 105 feet, or 8 stories, 8 13-foot tall stories. It was in full free-fall acceleration. That is impossible because in a natural collapse, columns would have to buckle. When columns buckle, there is a minimum resistance. It's asymptotic, if you know what that means. That means it never goes to zero. So it's impossible. You can't reach.
So here's what, I guess in layman's terms, to just get my hands here, Peter. So what he's saying is that the top floor collapses, hits the next floor, hits the next floor, hits the next floor. So it's bang, 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 bang. The weight of the upper floors.
It would slow down. What I'm trying to say is it was in full free fall acceleration. All of its potential energy was being converted to motion.
Instead of what I just described, the thing just collapsed like a pancake.
It just came down.
And so what are you suggesting brought it down, Tony?
I'm suggesting there was some form of demolition devices in that building for 8 stories or more.
You think that the explosives brought down Building 7?
Some form of demolition device. I'm not pretending to know what it is. I am saying that it was in free fall acceleration.
All right, let me ask you this.
NAST admitted to that.
Okay, let me ask you this before I get to Dad, before I get to Bob here. We've all seen old, obsolete buildings and public housing in other places outlive their usefulness, being demolished by the professionals who can actually collapse a building right in its own footprint. That's what it looks like happened to Building 7. Do you believe that's what happened?
Yes, I do believe that's what happened.
And why do you think they're lying about it?
I don't really know all the details of why they're lying about it. I can't read their minds. All I can say is, scientifically, it's impossible for fire to have done what we see.
And these, Bob, these 1,300 engineers and architects who agree with you and some of the other relatives' families. I know you found your son just a couple of days after the disaster. He was outside. I don't want to get into the details of how you believe he died. But these architects and engineers, do they support your contention? Do you believe that it was an inside job, that 9/11 was an inside job?
All right, Geraldo, I believe it was an inside job, okay? I'm here
you believe our government?
All right, wait, look, please. But the thing is, we don't have enough time to get into the reasons of that. We set up this Building What campaign. We saw the...
Building What?
.org.
BuildingWhat.org.
The reason we have that is because Judge Lehner, when we had a petition to have a new investigation in New York City about Building 7. And when the lawyers...
And you're asking the New York City Council. I don't want to interrupt also to reopen.
So I know we don't have the time, but anyway, he said, building what? Because no one has any idea about Building 7. So because I believe in... I've talked to so many firemen, so many EMS workers, policemen, who talk about the explosions. And I know you don't want to get into my son's... But I feel my son died from an explosion. I went to all the 9/11 Commission hearings. I've been researching this for 9 years.
So what do you want? Let's get to the bottom line before we're out of time.
I want truth. I've been lied to. I mean, it's beyond a reasonable doubt that the 9/11 Commission did not tell this story.
9/11 Commission barely mentioned Building 7, if at all.
Right.
Okay, what forum do you want the investigation in?
Well, the forum, what we want it is in New York City right now, because New York City, we feel, has an obligation to investigate 9/11.
So before we're out of time completely, Bob, do you want specifically the New York City Council to open its own investigation of the Building 7 collapse?
Absolutely.
And that would satisfy you if they did that?
Well, I'm not done. I'm still a parent. I'm a parent who has an obligation to find out why my son was murdered. As far as this show and New York City, I want the investigation. That will not be sufficient enough.
Your wound. I get that.
And I'm going beyond that.
But it's the beginning.
Of course it's the beginning, but that's why I support this Building What campaign.
Bob McElvain, we thank you. Tony Zambati, thank you very much. It is an intriguing topic. I certainly am much more open-minded about it than I was, and it is because of the involvement of the 9/11 families and all these engineers and architects. Clearly, they know more than I do. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I became a firefighter in 1990, March of 90. My whole family was firefighters. Goes back a long day. I'm looking up. All of a sudden, we hear, what the hell? It's been seconds. You've seen the wing of the plane come in, crash through the building, and explode bodies out of the building, all on Liberty Street. I run in screaming, a plane just hit the Trade Center. A plane just hit the Trade Center. I get on the phone to the dispatcher saying a plane, 1060 the box, plane just hit the Trade Center. Get all emergency vehicles down here immediately. It's on. So as we are now saddling up, trying to get out of quarters, hundreds and hundreds of people are trying to run in, while bodies are now just exploding on the ground. Like, what is going on here? The street was on fire. We were so dumbfounded because by the time we got around to the corner, to the west side, there was 30 floors of fire. We were like, holy cow, something's up here. And we got into the lobby, went to the command post right next to Father Judge, Chief Gansey, Chief of Department at the time, God rest his soul, and Father Judge. We got there, we got our orders from the command post to team up with Engine 5 and start our way up, right? So we're standing there in the lobby, we're getting all together. All of a sudden, we hear... I look down to my right, and the elevators exploded, something out of like a Bruce Willis Die Hard movie. People just come running out of the elevators, on fire, fireball. I mean, it was like, what is going on here? Something's up here. I mean, the plane's up there, now there's fire down here. People run around all on fire. This is crazy. So we said, look, we had our orders. That's our job. We're going to do what we got to do. So we were going up the stairs. As we were going up, there was fire here, there was fire. People burnt up on different levels, and we were trying to get a read on what floor are you coming from? What floor are you coming from? Is there fire on your floor? Is there fire on your floor? We were asking, and they were like, there's some fire on our floor. There's people trapped on other floors. And we're like trying to get a read. These people were pretty calm. People burnt coming down, just saying thank you, fireman. We were heading up to the 24th floor of the stairwell, and all of a sudden we heard, Mayday, Mayday, second plane, second plane. Swift, we're looking at each other like, come on, second plane, there's no way there's a second plane. Within seconds, our building got rocked. We got bounced around in the stairwell like pinballs, man. And we just said, you know what, time to go. We got out as much people as we could. Most of the people were out. We were the last guys going up the stairs. We got down, we started taking off, about 12 of us. We got down to the 3rd floor, and that's where the stairwell collapsed on us. And we had to dig our way out. Now the building's coming down. We can't see nothing. Once again, saying our prayers. The show is over here now. This is it. And with that, all of a sudden, we're looking for another stairwell. Me and the lieutenant open the door. We find a body in this closet. We were like, what the heck is that? Where did this come from? Holy shit, what's going on here? Something's crazy going on. We got our way out of the 3rd stool, and that's where the maintenance fella with a little flashlight saved our lives. He was pointed over, and if it wasn't for him, we never would have found another stairwell. The building would have collapsed. So Willie Rodriguez? Willie Rodriguez. Thank you, Willie. He saved our lives. He saved about 12 guys' lives that day. At least. It was funny because Tower 1 was coming down from the interior on us. So a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people, it just didn't poof. It was coming down. It was coming from the interior. It trapped us on the 3rd floor, and we were like, this thing is definitely coming down, man. Because, the inside structure was just disintegrated. We're like, how is this happening when the plane was up 50 more stories and the stairwells collapsing on us? Something wasn't right, man. Something wasn't right in Denmark that day. We got down to the lobby, and everything was blown out, exploded. Everything was... And we were the only ones in the lobby now. We're going, wait a second here. Where is everybody? Because the building was coming down the outside. They moved the command post to World Trade Center, too. So now we're like, we didn't get no where is everybody? We were in the lobby. It looks like everything was exploded. Everything was gone. We're like, what is going on here? We didn't know. We were like, this is crazy. All of a sudden, we said, listen, man, no time to cry for your mommy. We got to get out of here. So we took off like cockroaches. 12 of us. We all went our own ways. I ran across North End Avenue and outran the building, throwing my gear off, stripping it down to my skivvies. I was standing on the ledge, watching the building come down. I was diving in the river to Jersey. That's how that side me. I said, this is it, man. This is the end of the game here. I mean, I made it this far. I'm not going to let them get me now. No way. And what happened was, after that, we ran down North End Avenue, and there came the other tower. We were like, something's very wrong here. And as we ran, we ran down. We came around to Duane Street, where the filming of the French guys were that morning, and we had to go check in with the chief on Duane Street to count how many guys we thought might have died, and guys in my company who we were with. So we kind of figured we lost 3 right at that time. We actually ended up losing 5.
And what was your feeling about the lobby being so destroyed, as you said?
I mean, we were saying, how is this happening when it was 80 stories up? And, like, we was just, you think about it, you say, something else had to go on here. Something else was going on here. This just don't happen like this when a plane hits the 80th floor of a building and the lobby gets blown out. Sorry, I don't care. I don't care who you are.
What happened?
We was in an explosion. We was in the lobby, and the 3rd explosion. The whole lobby collapsed on us.
What
was it like? What was it like?
Horrible.
It's like hell. You don't want to know.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
planet probably.
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion. Because we was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole fucking plane blew. And we just collapsed on everybody inside the lobby.
Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary?
I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one was terrible. Then there was a 3rd one too after that one.
Third explosion after that?
That's right. Everybody was inside the building, waiting to go upstairs, and they just let loose. Everything just let loose inside the building.
So what you tell me is that there was
plane or whatever hit the building, then the secondary explosion?
It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. Then they exploded. The whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside.
And it's just mayhem after that?
Just man, everybody tried to make their way out.
Just trying to help all the brothers get out.
A lot of people trapped inside.
I was sitting in the Brooklyn.
People don't understand. There may be more. Any one of these fucking buildings could blow up. This ain't done yet.
For every window in the lobby to be exploded, I mean, them windows were like as thick as forget-it. They were 2-3 inch glasses, you know, come on. They exploded out of the lobby, you know, something, it wasn't from the jet fuel, no way. The elevators exploded, they were down from the lobby. The lobby was over here, that should never have happened. Something would happen there, and that wasn't, we came down, it looked like a bomb went off in the lobby. There was no fire, it just looked like a bomb went off, and the building collapsed. The time and the things that went on between the plane and by the time the buildings came down, there was a lot of things that happened that makes you really wonder what went on there. And that's you know, it's too much. There's too many things that went wrong that I mean, I don't like, you know, I'm not, I guess, an expert on a plane in a building, but just me being in there and experiencing what I've seen and dealt with, something wasn't right that day. And I think everybody in that lobby knew it.
It's safe to say that you agree with the premise that the Twin Towers, and especially Building 7, were brought down with other means than just a plane hit.
I believe so, yes. Yes. I personally, yes.
You've become quite associated, haven't you, with the extraordinary events that day, because you were...
That is correct.
You're supposed to be the last man who left the
North Tower when it collapsed.
What were you actually doing in there to start with?
Well, I worked in the building for 20 years, and I was a janitor. I was a person that actually cleaned 110 flights of stairwells every day. And on 9/11, I had the only master key that was available.
Which you have with you here. This is the master key that was used.
They call it the key of hope.
I started the day by calling my supervisor and telling him that I was not going to work. The reason was that it was such a beautiful day that I wanted to stay home. I wanted to take a sick day off. And I called my supervisor and he begged to me to go back into the company. And I made it to work, but I made it late. And that was a miracle by itself, because if I made it there at 8 o'clock, I would have been dead automatically, or I would have been trapped on the top of the building.
And at 8:46, we hear, boom! An explosion so loud that pushes us upwards in the air. The walls cracked, the false ceiling fell on top of us, the sprinkler system got activated, everybody started screaming in horror, in pure horror, because we didn't know what it was. And the first thing that comes to my mind is that a generator just blew out on the basement, on the mechanical room.
I was on B1, basement 1, when this huge explosion happened that pushed us upwards in the air, an indication that something very powerful exploded below us. And at that moment, when I went to say it, we hear, pa! The impact and the explosion of the plane on the top. 2 different events separated by 7 seconds, more or less.
And you could hear the difference from the top and from the bottom. Come on, I work in the building for 20 years and I know the difference between something coming from the basement and something coming from the top. So everybody's screaming in horror, help, help, and we didn't know what to do.
What floor were you actually on when the first plane hit?
I was in the basement. I was in the basement, actually. There was
Right.
a huge explosion in the basement, and at that moment, the first thing that I said, whoa, it's a generator that just blew up. And because we have no windows, we have no way of saying, you know, what's going on. A person comes running into the office saying, explosion, explosion. All the skin hanging from under his armpits, on both arms to the top of the fingertips. And when I look at his face, pieces missing from his face. And I said, what happened? What happened? And when I said, don't move, because I was going to pick up the phone to call the emergency medical unit that was located on the other tower, bang, another explosion. And that's when I said, no, everybody's got to get out.
From the initial explosion in the basement, I took 14 people from the basement, led the way out so they could go outside the building because nobody was taking the leadership. After that I went back, went into the North Tower. There were two people stuck inside of an elevator, a lift, and they have water going into the lift, and they were encapsulated, and they were screaming that they were going to drown. I was able, with the help of another guy, to open the door, find a ladder, get these two people out, save them, take them outside the building, and go back inside the building. There were 5 master keys in the building, and I have the only one available at that moment.
And this key was basically what I used to actually go with the firemen, floor by floor.
We start making it up the staircase, and as we go up, we hear small explosions going off. Pa! Pa! Different areas.
So you climbed up the stairwells with the firefighters, trying to open the doors, trying to let as many people as possible escape.
Now, again, why is this key so important? Because Class A building, the codification in New York is that any skyscraper, 3 doors will not open on the staircases, 1 will open. 3 won't open, 1 will open. So we have to go and open all those doors that did not open. When we got to the 27th floor, the whole unit of firemen collapsed on the corridor, one after the other, because they couldn't continue going up. It was physically impossible for them to continue. They took their equipment, they took their jackets, they took their boots, they dropped themselves on the floor. A very shocking moment for me, because I said, oh my God, I feel like I have to go alone now. Remember, David Lim said, Willie, do you know this floor? I said, yeah, I know this floor. He said, where can I get water? He said, on the other side, there's a machine. So let's go. He breaks the machine. We start taking bottled water, putting it on trash cans, and bringing it to the firemen and giving them the bottled water. I remember I called my mother from a phone that was working in that office. Call her. My mother is in Puerto Rico. But I wanted to let her know that there was an accident in case she heard something on the news, that I was okay. When she picked up the phone, she was like, what are you doing there? Everybody in the world knew but us what was happening. She said, get out now. And I said, I can't. I'm helping these people. They don't know the building. But don't worry. And I lied to her. I said, I'm going to get up to a certain part, but I'm not going to get to the area where they have the fire. When my actual intention was to go to windows of the world and help my friends. That was my motivating and the power that was actually pushing me to go to the top. Because I knew these people were stuck in there. I hung up on the phone and I have calls from my supervisor saying, Rodriguez, abandon the building right now. Abandon the building right now. And I say, I can't. I'm helping the fire department. He said, that's not your job. Get out now. I turn off the radio and I continue going up by myself, opening door, letting people out, and I continue going up until I got to the 39th floor. When I got to the 39th floor, from the opposite staircase, there were 3 staircases, A, B, and C. Police officer David Lim came up with 2 firemen. And as we were talking about what was going to be our next move, we hear, boom! The impact on the other tower, and it was so hard that our building oscillated so much that we lost practically our footing. And all of a sudden we hear, boom, 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 boom. And on the radio, we lost 65. We lost 65, meaning that the 65th floor collapsed floor by floor by floor by floor, up to the 44th floor, the sky lobby, 5 flights away. And I started screaming, we gotta go up, we gotta go up. Officer Lim said, Rodriguez, you've done enough, but you don't get paid for this. And I said, what? I'm going up. And he said, no. You stay here, you're still a civilian, and you are my responsibility. I said, sorry, I'm not giving the key to anybody. I'm going up. And he said, better if you give me a hand with the person on the wheelchair on the 27th floor. And he said, you know, David, I'm going to go down, but I'm coming right up. I'm going to help you with that, but I'm coming right up. So I ran down to the 27th floor. When I ran to the 27th floor, I screamed to the firemen, I have orders to get this guy out right now. The guy was taken out of the wheelchair. He was put on a rescue basket, all tied up. 3 guys stood up and said, let's go. We grabbed him. We started going down the stairwell. As we go down, we make it to the lobby. We make it to the lobby. And all of a sudden, one of the firemen tells me, please, go get the ambulance ready. And I hear, run, run, run. I look at the left side and I see the Marriott Hotel almost gone. Bodies everywhere. And I said, God, please help me. And the only thing I see is a fire truck in front of the building. And I just slid right under the fire truck. And all of a sudden the building started to destroy itself on top. And you hear, boom, boom, boom. And the truck going down. And all I said at that moment was, please don't let my mother see my body in pieces. Let her recognize my body, please, please.
The building basically engulfed me and I was totally buried under the rubble, alive. And then this dust came. That dust went under every orifice under the truck and it basically burned my face, burned my skin, and I couldn't breathe. Then I think at that moment, I'm not dying squashed to death, but now I'm gonna die of asphyxia. So I have to put my face under my shirt to be able to breathe. And hours after, I was pulled from the rubble, thinking at that moment that I lost my legs. But a miracle. I didn't break a single bone.
Rodriguez weet op dat moment nog niet wat er is gebeurd. Wat die eerste veronderstelde explosie heeft veroorzaakt, vlak voor het eerste vliegtuig nog.
I don't know if it was a bomb or not. I am not an expert in explosives. It sounded like one. It made the noise like one. It created, you know, a destruction level that, you know, I wouldn't expect anything else to be but that. But was that a bomb? I have no idea what it was. Compassion is more powerful than violence. It will make you act in ways that you never saw possible. And I was so desperate to get to my friends and to save them. And the sad thing is that I was recognized for saving hundreds of people, but the people that I really wanted to help, I never was able to save a single one of them. I lost 200 friends on 9/11. A lot of people call me a conspiracy theorist. And it's funny because I was there. I am an eyewitness. I experienced the event. I do not speculate because I experienced it in my own skin. I have the people that have come out and validated the story constantly. I have the people that have survived also the event and have tried to tell their part of the story, which actually coincide with mine. I lost 200 friends that do not have answers, and I will continue until we get the answers.
My name is Anthony Saltalamacchia. My position was morning supervisor from the hours of 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. I would supervise over 100 workers and designate their work for the day. On the morning of September 11th, I was in my office. I was just getting the work handed out to all the employees when I received a phone call from William Rodriguez saying that he wasn't going to make it into work that day. I then kind of pleaded with him to come into work because his job is very, how could you say, difficult, to where he had to clean 110 floors of stairs, and not too many people are up for that challenge. So, you know, I kind of persuaded him to come in and get the job done. So I then waited for him for his arrival. Upon waiting, he then came in. We then were, you know, talking about the day's work and what needed to be done, when we heard a massive explosion that was in the World Trade Center at about 8:46 a.m. in the morning. The explosion came from, I believe, at first we believed that it came from the mechanical room. And then we heard a series of other explosions that sounded up on the above levels of the building, to where we then realized that there was something wrong and there was a major problem. And about, I'd say, 14 to 15 people came running and screaming into our office. We then got together as a group, and William kind of basically got everybody settled down, you know, tried to help everybody relax. Then right after that, the floor started shaking. The tile from above, which was above us, started coming down, falling on us, and we knew that there was something seriously wrong happening. A man came into the office. He was a black man, very shaky, very like in shock. He had multiple wounds. His arms were bleeding. Skin was peeling off. You could just see basically his flesh. It was, you know, a very tough thing to see. Then William grabbed a cloth and wrapped it around him. And you know, at the time, nobody really wanted to go near him because he was just covered in blood. But you know, William did what he had to do, and get him to safety. And as we're standing there, more explosions were happening, a lot of screaming, confusion. And then William said, you know, that it's time, like, we have to get out of the building. In that manner, all of us departed out. It was very smoky, very cloudy. You know, it just looked like very serious, that we knew that we had to get out of the building. We then ran towards the truck dock area, which was pretty much our only way out, because in the beginning William led us to the fire escape, which led us to the lobby, but that was completely under smoke and it just was a bad situation, so we went the opposite way towards the truck dock, carrying this man with us. We then got to the truck dock, ran up the truck dock, and got outside. Finally, I'm not sure of what time that was, but we then saw the ambulance, and William and Kenny directed the man, carried him over to the ambulance, and made sure that he got to safety. I remember Willie wanted to go back into the building. I told him, no, stay out here with me. Let's get things more, you know, let's get everybody together, get everybody calmed down. He just refused and was, you know, screaming, we have to go back in the building. We have to go back. I'm sure he, you know, he had a lot of ties to a lot of people in there, and he wanted to make sure that they were all right. So I, you know, did my best to try and persuade him to stay, you know, with us and, you know, be safe, but he just didn't listen and ran back into the building. I remember him running back into the building. I don't remember seeing him after that. I knew that he was in there. And funny thing is that when I got home later that night, I seen him on television, on the news. He had like he was covered in, like, you know, all the dust and everything. And I was like, wow, that's the guy who I was with when the explosion happened. And I knew then he was okay, which made me feel better. So, but at first, yes, I did think that something terrible happened to him, because I remember him running running back into the building, and that was the last I saw of him. The amount of explosions I've heard from 8:46 to the time we get out was so many, at least 10. It was just like multiple explosions to where I felt like there was different grenades. That's what it sounded like. It was just different grenades being set off, like, in the building. It was like, you know, there was one major explosion, and then there was different explosions throughout that period of time until we got out. So I believe 6 years after 9/11, I don't know the truth. That I don't believe a word that they say. That, you know, I don't believe everything that they say. I think is a cover-up.
I studied physics at MIT. I did electrical engineering for about 8 years. I've had quite a bit of practical engineering experience. When I first saw the collapses, I was absolutely convinced that they were not spontaneous. One of the first things that I did was to speak with one of my patients, who is a retired Army Corps of Engineers fellow who's done a lot of demolition and construction. Showed him some of the public source videos that are available of it, and he immediately pointed out that there were squibs, which represent little puffs of smoke essentially coming out of the buildings initially, which were clearly a sign of controlled demolition. He had no opinions beyond that, but he said without doubt that it was a controlled demolition. That sort of set me on the path of continuing to examine it and trying to gather as much evidence as I could. And the question I pose, what don't we know and why don't we know it, is sort of addressing the fact that at this point we still do not really have a meaningful explanation for what happened to the buildings. We have had several studies at this point, which I will go into, as to trying to determine a plausible scenario for the collapse. As of this point, none of them have presented us with anything that I think could be reasonably called a convincing and detailed account of why the collapse has occurred. And the question that's been addressed previously, the enormous destruction of physical evidence, as Chris was saying, the site was scrubbed very thoroughly. Out of the entire mass of the buildings that were destroyed, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, who are now doing the ongoing investigation, managed to save about 240 pieces out of the entire building. All of the rest of it was basically recycled. The obvious question is what does it mean that there was a controlled demolition? At the simplest level, it means that someone had a lot of access to the buildings over a long enough period of time to set this up. It implies, as many other things have tonight, that the people who had effective control of the site had an interest in having it scrubbed and making sure that no information was available, that a forensic reconstruction couldn't be done. Even in much smaller catastrophes, we typically will reconstruct things as completely as possible. For example, TWA Flight 800 pieces were dredged off the bottom of the sea. A complete reconstruction was done to allow a detailed analysis. In this case, the exact opposite was done. The first report that was really issued on this was issued by FEMA in collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers. There was basically a volunteer team from ASCE that had very limited access to the site. A lot of the pieces that they were able to retrieve were retrieved by going to landfills and trying to find interesting pieces before they were disposed of. The initial FEMA report basically acknowledged that the kerosene would have burned off very quickly. What wasn't destroyed in the initial fireball would have been consumed fairly rapidly and would have only really served as an ignition for the rest of the material. And the second point being that the fuel here really was strictly office contents. If you think of a modern office with copying machines, computers, and as has been previously mentioned, the smoke, particularly from Building 2, just before it collapsed, was very black looking. This is generally an indication of an inefficient fire in which there's not enough oxygen for the amount of fuel. These types of fires typically burn very cool. They are not hot flames like blowtorches.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava
from a volcano.
Actually melted beams where it was molten steel that was being dug out.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of a wall.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat into one single element.
And they pulled off a big block of concrete, and there was like a little river of steel flowing.
Many witnesses, firemen and lots of people described the flowing molten metal, iron or steel at extremely hot temperatures, and John Gross categorically denied their observations, so that because their observations don't fit his preconceived notion, he not only ignored evidence, he denied evidence.
There were reports of molten steel having been seen in the rubble pile of all three buildings, and I knew that jet fuel, which is essentially kerosene, is not capable of melting steel nor iron. Kerosene or jet fuel burns at less than 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, and molten steel needs at least 2700 degrees Fahrenheit in order to melt.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel. And yet we have evidence of molten iron in the microspheres, in the rubble pile, and the metal pouring out of the side of the tower.
I worked as in the project engineering department of the casting plant of Alcan, the aluminum company of Canada, one of the largest aluminum smelters on the planet at the time. And in that smelter we turned aluminum oxide into aluminum, molten aluminum. Molten aluminum is silver. It's not yellow, it's silver. It looks like mercury. The yellow molten metal that I saw pouring out of the South Tower is indicative of molten iron.
The official explanation of what happened there was that the heat from the fire supposedly softened the steel and thereby brought the buildings down. Well, second law of thermodynamics says, just like water can only flow downhill when it's poured on the ground, similarly heat can only move downhill. But with heat, downhill means from a region of higher temperature to a region of lower temperature. And the heat flowing uphill from a 750 degree flame to a 3,000 degree puddle of molten steel violated the second law of thermodynamics.
The only way that's known that a carbonaceous material can cause steel or iron oxide to turn into a molten metal is in a blast furnace. Yeah, and that's very different than what we had.
Overflights had detected with infrared camera 1400 degree Fahrenheit hotspots on the surface of ground zero. And that being there for a week, indicates that there was something very hot going on below the surface.
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. It was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot. If we hit it too much steam, you won't be able to see what he's doing. Great.
There were fires of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the ground.
You see how this debris is still smoking? That's from the fires that are still burning. 8 weeks later, we still got fires burning. Every now and then, one of the pieces of equipment will dig in, they'll open up a small area, the oxygen will rush in, and you'll get this plume of brown, black smoke coming up. That's because that fire just got more oxygen. So, these things are burning. At one point, I think they were about 2,800 degrees.
The cores themselves, basically, if you've seen diagrams of the building, there's a large central rectangle in each of the towers that contained 47 columns. And these columns basically were the primary structural support of the building. They were given the role of supporting the whole gravitational load of the building. Since they were so strong, it would have been reasonable to think that they would have withstood, at least to some extent, the collapse. But in fact, as we see after the buildings collapsed, there was basically only little stubs of these things standing up a floor or two above the ground level. The cores did not have much in them that would burn. The cores basically were dedicated to things like elevator shafts, utility shafts, stairways. So you have drywall material, you have a little bit of carpeting, you don't really have any inflammable material in the core itself. The core was specifically designed so it could not function as a chimney. They did not want, in the case of a fire, for the fire to be able to travel through the elevators or for air to come in through the elevators. So they were designed with what this architect Aaron Swirsky, I believe it was, referred to as a hermetically sealed system. There were fire shutters that were designed to close off the core in the event of an event like this. And those, as far as we know, functioned properly, which means that there was a very limited amount of oxygen available. Okay, as far as the issue of what failed and how, some of the initial suggestions, and these showed up in the NOVA documentary, which is a good example of what I like to call proof by computer animation. Thomas Egar, who was a material scientist but not a structural engineer, who became a spokesman for these documentaries, indicated that the floors had somehow failed, that the trusses supporting the floors had failed. This was the theory that was put forward actually in the initial FEMA report. Subsequently, there have been basically complete contradictions of that. Jim Hoffman has done quite a bit of research which is available on the web concerning the problems with this idea that the floors would have simply fallen. There was a study done by Weidlinger Associates. The chief engineer there was Mathis Levy, who's a very well-known authority on building collapses. He specifically disavowed the idea of pancaking or collapsing of the floors. And the most recent official report we have on this, which is from National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, rejected the idea that floor collapse was part of it. And so as a result, we have basically no sequential model at this point. What NIST has suggested is that there was some kind of simultaneous collapse of the cores, but they have not attempted to give any kind of modeling as to whether those cores could have in fact been destroyed by the fires in the way that they claim. Unfortunately, the material that would have allowed a detailed fire analysis, the actual physical evidence, is all gone.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid. And the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
I walked into the office and the first words that I heard was, a plane's just run into the World Trade Center. And my initial thought was, well, that's okay. It's built to withstand a 707.
It did not seem possible that these towers that were designed to withstand the impact of a 707 could possibly collapse in such a short order of time from the time that they were hit. They were designed to withstand hurricane force winds of up to 140 miles an hour.
These buildings are built to handle several times the load above them. Those perimeter columns could handle 5 times the load above them, and the core columns could handle 3 times the load above them.
I remember walking up to a window, and a young man turned to me with tears coming down his face, and he said, "Will they fall down?" And I said, "No." Never has a steel structure building in the history of steel structured buildings ever fallen down for the reasons of fire.
The majority of the jet fuel was burnt up instantly in the big fireball, and it was gone. The fires that were left were office furnishings and carpet and things like that. A lot of things in these kind of buildings have to be fire resistant by nature. It's required by code. So there really isn't a whole lot of fuel in there to begin with.
The media portrayed these fires as being extremely hot, but the fires were not that hot in World Trade Center 1 and 2. If you look at the NIST zone data, you could see this. And to use our own powers of observation, you could tell by seeing these fires and seeing black smoke come out the windows. That means that the fires were oxygen starved, and it was incomplete combustion. And so it was a low temperature fire.
I looked up in a manual the burning temperature of jet fuel and found that under the conditions that existed at the World Trade Center on 9/11, that jet fuel had to have been burning at about 750 degrees Fahrenheit. I also noticed that the official explanation of what happened there was that the heat from the fire supposedly softened the steel and thereby brought the buildings down. If you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel, let alone melt it. So immediately I knew at that point that the official explanation was dead wrong.
One of the most significant things to my thinking that indicates that this could not have been the sort of collapse that we are told it was is the presence of the dust clouds. And as you've seen in the pictures, and I'm sure all of us have seen probably more than we would like, there were very, very large clouds of very thick dust that enveloped the area, that crossed the river, that made it almost all the way to New Jersey from the pictures that I've seen. This type of flow is something that we are familiar with in physics. It occurs in only two situations that we know of naturally. One is in volcanic eruptions, where a large amount of material is suddenly exploded into the air and basically forms small particles. The other situation is something called turbidity currents. These occur along the edges of the continental shelves, where mud or sediment will slump, become suspended in water. And the common thread is that you have large amounts of a dense material that is suspended very quickly in a fluid, thereby creating another denser fluid, which is in effect the dust cloud. And that fluid can achieve considerable velocities. The problem with creating this sort of slurry of fine particles is that there really is no mechanism that has been proposed. We have concrete floors with carpeting or flooring over them. We have furniture. We have floors basically that are coming together in a collapse, but the concrete is basically protected under these layers. Early in the collapse, in the very first moments, we see these thick clouds being ejected at very high speed. They're clearly dense because they flow downward and become part of this large overall pyroclastic flow. What we're basically being told is that the concrete sort of jumped up into midair, exploded itself, and then was ejected as the floors came together. Not a very plausible mechanism, but I have yet to hear of anything else proposed to explain it. From quite a few people on the scene, we've been told that the powder it represented most of the concrete, that the amount of intact macroscopic chunks of concrete on the scene were negligible, that basically everything was reduced to powder. And incidentally, we also know that other things besides concrete were reduced to powder. We know that contents of computers, exotic metals from computer chips, these sorts of things were also identified in the dust and in very small particles, generally on the order of less than 100 microns in diameter. So we have a real issue of mechanism as far as what in the process of this collapse could cause so many things to be pulverized so finely.
The spread of debris in a large radius around each tower. What we see is an outward explosion of material beyond the perimeters of each footprint. And this is not expected, and it's not congruent with the reports of our government.
Large multi-ton beams were hurled hundreds of yards laterally. Gravity works vertically, not laterally.
So something's happening to throw these things horizontally at those kinds of speeds. And here it is trailing white smoke the whole time. It it really is indicative of some kind of explosion.
The individual explosions that I noticed 20 and 30 and 40 stories below the collapsing structure.
And naysayers tend to say, well, that's just air being blown out the windows. I mean, it doesn't really work to say it's just air pressure. And I've estimated these are coming out faster than 100 miles an hour.
The floors pancaking upon themselves would create gushes of air out the side, but not the kind of explosive force that we saw that would throw I-beams across the street into the windows of other buildings.
The ejection of the materials out of the building, the manner in which it fell, the speed at which it fell, exhibited all the signs of demolitions and the completeness of the destruction down to their individual elements.
When the South Tower was destroyed, at first it looked like it was going to land in the street or take a building out next to it, and then all of a sudden it disappears in this huge cloud of smoke.
There were two substations on the 108th floor, the 75th floor, and the 41st floor, and the 7th floor. At those 8 locations, there were 4 transformers in each substation that weighed over 30,000 pounds. The transformers would not explode on their own. They were air-cooled, dry-type transformers. And yet, after the collapse, there was no evidence of them being found at the bottom of the towers. I wonder why.
As an architect, I would expect to see larger portions of the building floors, the decking, the steel decking, the concrete topping, much larger remnants of what the structural components of this building was. After all, there was 110 floors in each building, and each floor plate was over an acre in size.
And there's no concrete. There's very little concrete. All you see is aluminum and steel. What happened to the concrete? The concrete was pulverized. And I was down here Tuesday, and it was like you were on a foreign planet. All of lower Manhattan, not just this site, from river to river, there was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
For the towers to collapse the way we saw them collapse basically implies that the columns simply collapsed into themselves. They telescoped straight down. Steel keeps a lot of its structural integrity, even when heated, until you begin to approach the melting point. You don't really see a catastrophic loss of strength, and this is what we're talking about. We're talking about basically vertical box columns collapsing into themselves, which implies a complete loss of mechanical strength. And as far as the initial impacts, this recent NIST study made an interesting point about World Trade Centers 2. The film analysis showed that it oscillated for about 4 minutes after it was struck by the airplane, and the oscillation rate was identical to what would be expected for the intact tower. Trade Center towers and most modern buildings are heavily redundant in the sense that the load bearing can be shifted to other members if some of them fail, and we saw that happen in this case. Stresses do redistribute, but absent further weakening of the structural members, that distribution is limited. It happens, the structure restabilizes, and unless there's significant further damage, it doesn't progress to a total collapse. World Trade 1 began collapsing from the very top after an hour and 40 minutes. It's very hard to imagine office contents progressively heating up hotter and hotter over that period of time. And for a building to collapse from the very top, which is the least heavily loaded, is also very odd, to say the least. Just a couple of other anomalies. As we know, there were reports of explosions. There were reports of underground explosions in both of the towers at the time of the impact.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion
inside the lobby.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
Then it was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses.
It sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden 3 big explosions.
About 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall.
And we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
We heard a very loud blast, an explosion.
We heard a loud explosion.
At that point, we heard a large boom. You know, I looked up and just saw the building coming at us.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
There was another major explosion.
All of a sudden, you hear explosion, and then you could see the building starting to collapse.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We could hear a rumble, which was about 5 seconds long, preceding the actual collapse, and then a boom when each of those towers collapsed.
Just seconds ago, there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
I was about 5 blocks away when I heard explosions.
And then you heard from far away, boom, boom. And you heard the boom, 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 boom.
Floor by floor, it started popping out. It was if they had detonated. If they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
And it just started going pop. It just started going boom, 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 boom. And he goes, how fast? I go like firecrackers.
They're reporting exactly what I would expect. You're hearing boom, 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 waves of explosions going off. Not one massive big boom.
There's so many videos of witnesses from that day that report explosions. There's radio transmissions from the FDNY. We have the transcripts that were recorded, back in 2001 of all these firefighters and first responders reporting explosions.
This testimony should have caused the presumption that there was a good chance explosive residue would be found and justified testing for it, rather than the opposite.
It doesn't look like a collapse. It's like a huge mushrooming, billowing kind of an event. That whole thing looks nothing like a building falling down. It's a building being blown up. That's what the physics shows.
Yet they refuse to consider the possibility that explosives or some other form of demolition device could have been used to cause the collapses of the towers. And the fact that controlled demolition is consistent with all the available technical evidence. And the response to that request for correction is NIST simply saying they're unable to provide a full explanation for the total collapse, even though that was their task given to them by Congress.
From the Naudet brothers' film 9/11, we see that the lobby of the North Tower was extensively damaged with what looks like high explosive blast damage, and this was immediately after the plane collision. But we know that on the weekend before, there were power downs, and there appear to have been evacuation drills going on throughout the previous week, which suggests that at least some people knew that something was happening. The power downs may represent a time window in which demolition charges would have been planted, although I think it's possible that they also were planted over a much longer period of time, given the relative accessibility of the buildings. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
How is it that on 4 separate occasions on one day that $1 trillion military and intelligence infrastructure could fail?
And the question that I tried to pose before the secretary had to go to lunch was whether or not the activities of the 4 war games going on September 11th actually impaired our ability to respond to the attacks.
The answer to the question is no, did not impair our response. In fact, General Eberhard, who was then the commander of North American Aerospace Defense Command, as he testified in front of the 9/11 Commission, I believe he told them that it enhanced our ability to respond. There were 2 CPXs. There was 1 Department of Justice exercise that didn't have anything to do with the other 3. And there was an actual operation ongoing because there was some Russian bomber activity up near Alaska.
So, did the war games ultimately help or hinder our response? September 11th was day 2 of Vigilant Guardian, an exercise staged by the Joint Chiefs and NORAD, which simulated hijacked planes in the northeastern United States. Vigilant Guardian is a branch of Global Guardian, a mass Armageddon exercise being conducted at Offutt Air Force Base in cooperation with NORAD. Originally scheduled to take place in late October, Global Guardian was moved to September. The exercise is reportedly canceled after the second Twin Tower is hit. 3 E-4B Doomsday planes remain airborne.
Two government sources familiar with the incident tell CNN it was a military aircraft, but say the details are classified. This comparison of the CNN video and an official Air Force photo suggests the mystery plane is among the military's most sensitive aircraft, an Air Force E-4B. The E-4B is a state-of-the-art flying command post, built and equipped for one reason: to keep the government running no matter what, even in the event of a nuclear war. Ask the Pentagon, and it insists this is not a military aircraft, and there is no mention of it in the official report of the 9/11 Commission. The Pentagon, the Secret Service, and the FAA all say they, at least for public consumption, have no explanation of the giant plane over the president's house, just as the smoke began to rise across the river at the Pentagon.
Barksdale Air Force Base also participated in Global Guardian. Instead of returning directly to Washington, D.C., President Bush would fly to both Barksdale and Offutt Air Force Base before returning to the White House. Another drill, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to monitor a fleet of Russian MiGs on a training mission. Northern Vigilance also placed inputs onto military radar screens. Also referred to as phantoms, inputs are simulated errant aircraft, which appear real to those participating in the exercise.
We fought many phantoms that day.
3 F-16s from Andrews Air Force Base, located 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a training mission in North Carolina. Fort Belvoir, an Army base 10 miles south of the Pentagon, intended to test security in case of a terrorist attack. Employees in the Office of Emergency Management on the 23rd floor of World Trade Center Building 7 continue preparations for Tripod, a biological attack drill scheduled for September 12th. Finally, the National Reconnaissance Office in Virginia begins a drill at 8:45, conducted by a team from the CIA, in which a plane crashes into their building. Also, a number of war games were being conducted that have yet to be fully disclosed.
Ask about the war games that were planned for 9/11.
Commissioner Gorelick.
Could you please be quiet? We have only a few minutes with General Myers. I'd like to ask a question. General Myers, I'm sorry.
I would ask, please, people in the audience to be quiet if you want to stay here. Submitted some.
So, sir, statement. This commission has not answered my questions. I'm walking out. It's a farce. I will. Thank you.
So let me get this straight. On the morning of 9/11, the United States is running drills in which hijacked aircraft go in and out of radar. Fighter jets are flown out of the United States, and planes are crashed into buildings. What a coincidence.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground. hitting the Pentagon in the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping.
Federal officials have begun a major investigation into whether someone or many people benefited financially from the evil done to the country last Tuesday. Not long before the attacks occurred, there were some financial transactions in the stock market that may indicate knowledge of the attack before it began. ABC's Antonio Mora is here. Whether they ever get to, if they ever get to the bottom of it, it will be astonishing.
Astonishing, no question, Peter. What many Wall Street analysts believe is that the terrorists made bets that a number of stocks would see their prices fall. They did so by buying what are called puts. If you bet right, the rewards can be huge. The risks are also huge, unless, of course, you know something bad is going to happen to the company you're betting against.
This could very well be insider trading at the worst, most horrific, most evil use you've ever seen in your entire life.
One example, United Airlines. The Thursday before the attack, more than 2,000 contracts betting that the stock would go down were purchased. 90 times more in one day than in 3 weeks. When the markets reopened, United's stock dropped. The price of the contracts soared, and someone may have made a lot of money fast.
$180,000 turns into $2.4 million when that plane hits the World Trade Center.
It's almost the same story with American Airlines.
That's a five-fold increase in the value of what was a $337,000 trade on Monday.
All of a sudden becomes what?
$1.8 million.
And there's much more, including an extraordinarily high number of bets against Morgan Stanley and Marsh & McLennan, two of the World Trade Center's biggest tenants. Could this be a coincidence?
This would be one of the most extraordinary coincidences in the history of mankind if it was a coincidence.
It is absolutely unprecedented to see cases of insider trading covering the entire world, from Japan to the United States and North America to Europe.
ABC News has now learned that the Chicago Board of Options Exchange launched their investigation into the unusual trading last week. That may have given them enough time to stop anyone from profiting from death here in the U.S. It may also give investigators, Peter, a hot trail that might lead them to the terrorists.
Thanks very much. As a reminder of the complications here, though, the Secretary of the Treasury said today of this investigation, you've got to go through 10 veils before you get to the real source. Yep. Thanks, Antonio.
NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone.
No, I always imagine myself making great plays, but you never think about being MVP.
Investigate 9/11. 9/11 was perpetrated by people within our own government.
All right. Is everybody all right?